Welcome back. This week, Canada's reckoning with its colonial history was interrupted by its racist present. A terrorist attack in London, Ontario killed four members of a Muslim family and left a 9-year-old boy orphaned and injured. Are Canadians ready to take it upon themselves to confront Islamophobia? Let's go to Saleha Farouk, who's in conversation with Farid Khan, the founder of Canadians United Against Hate. Over to you, Saleha.
Thank you. Today, we look forward to speaking with Farid Khan, who is the founder of Canadians Against Hate, as well as being a human rights advocate and anti-racism activist in his own right. Farid, thank you so much for being here with us today in light of recent events in London, Ontario.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Our pleasure. Now, all of the victims in this horrendous crime were all innocent bystanders, but something quite unique about this certain attack is how children's lives were impacted and upended. We know that 15-year-old Yumna Salman was killed, and her 9-year-old brother, Fayaz, is currently battling injuries while hospitalized. What does it mean when such Islamophobic violence begins to touch the lives of children around us?
Well, I think it means the politicians have failed us. When the Quebec City mosque shooting happened in January 2017, Muslim community activists, anti-racism activists, myself included, approached members of the government, the federal government, and urged them to take decisive action, concrete action, take a national leadership approach to addressing issues of Islamophobia and hate in general. And what we got were thoughts and prayers, politicians attending vigils, and marginal response on the political level and the legislative level to addressing this very serious problem in our country. And the result is that in the past 4 years, since the horrific events in Quebec City, there have been two other incidents. One last September where a Muslim man was stabbed to death outside a mosque, and now this hate crime that occurred in London.
You talk about legislative action, and a lot of Canadians agree with you. What would that legislative action look like? Are we talking about getting Canadian institutions and community service organizations involved in increasing awareness about anti-racial discrimination, Islamophobic violence? What would that change look like, especially if it came from a top-down approach in the way that you describe?
Well, I think that community organizations are already doing their part to try and raise awareness and build bridges. I think that Muslim community organizations and various social justice organizations have been doing that. But the heavy lifting should not be left up to groups and communities because they work in silos within their communities. We need a national approach led by the federal government, working with provincial governments, the same way that they worked to address the COVID-19 pandemic. Hate, racism, and bigotry in this country are a pandemic. They've been around a lot longer than COVID-19, and Muslims know this only too well. Our community has been victimized after 9/11. It has been villainized. There have been attacks against Muslims, and particularly Muslim women are vulnerable. There have been racist vandalism at mosques repeatedly. There was a court decision that came out yesterday about two paramedics in Hamilton who basically ignored their responsibility to treat a Muslim teen who had tried to help a elderly member of his mosque when he was being attacked, and he was shot in the stomach. And these two paramedics basically treated it as if it was no big deal. Now, the media didn't frame it as an issue of bigotry or Islamophobia, but that's definitely what it was. So with respect to governments, it requires a national approach, it requires a national commitment, and it requires politicians to stop going for the photo op like they did yesterday, stop being hypocrites, which they are. I issued a press release today talking about the hypocrisy of the messaging from all federal leaders who are all complicit in promoting Islamophobia by both action and inaction. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was asked yesterday in a media conference, did he think that Bill 21 contributed to Islamophobia in Canada or in Quebec? And he said, no, it didn't, and he's not going to be intervening in that. Both Erin O'Toole and Yves-François Blanchet, gave these big speeches about fighting hate and Islamophobia, but they both voted against the Islamophobia motion M103 in 2017. And even Jagmeet Singh, who has been the strongest on fighting hate and racism, he has said that he would not intervene on Bill 21 until it reached the Supreme Court if he became prime minister. So no one's hands are clean on this.
Interestingly, in 2009, the police confirmed approximately 1,900 hate crimes in Canada, and those specific hate crimes targeting Muslim Canadians rose by approximately 10% from 2018. You yourself do a lot of anti-racism work in your community, and we're talking here about the short-lived solidarity statements from such Canadian leaders. To what extent do you believe that exclusionary rhetoric and exclusionary decisions on such bills like Bill 21 might contribute to Canadians feeling like it's okay to attack Muslims in broad daylight in Canada?
Well, of course, you hit it right on the head. When you get political leaders like the Premier of Quebec saying this is the will of the people support this, and he puts in place legislation that denies the fundamental human rights of racialized religious minorities, he's basically saying to his province, members of his province, you know what, go ahead and be racist, be Islamophobic, we've got your back. And then, when that bill came out, there was a poll done across the country, and surprisingly, more than a third of Canadians felt that the bill was okay at the time. So, you have that. You have right-wing media voices who are pushing Islamophobia. You've got certain right-wing politicians who are pushing narratives of racism. The Premier of Alberta has someone on his senior staff who denies the Indigenous genocide. When you have people like that out there in public saying things like they're saying, what it does is it enables and it energizes people who already feel deep prejudice towards minority communities. And Muslims have been on the receiving end of this far too often, and Muslims have paid for this racism literally in blood over the last number of years.
I really wanted to get your take on this when it comes to justice and accountability, which is the next step that people are looking forward to. Many people are urging that this level of legal accountability should include charges of terrorism or first-degree murder, and both these charges do carry 25 to life here in Canada. Tell me, how likely is this to happen, and is this a right preventative measure for the future?
Well, I've been watching the media conferences from the London police, and it's definite that there will be first-degree murder charges, 4 charges of first-degree murder and 1 charge of attempted murder. The terrorism charge needs to be added to that because far too often that part of the criminal code has been used in instances where Muslims have been caught conspiring. They haven't killed anybody, they haven't attacked anything, but they've been caught conspiring to commit acts, and they've been charged under the terrorism laws. In this case, this person was radicalized to a level where he decided to go out and kill people who were Muslim. He killed them specifically because they were Muslim, and that is an ideology. And I'll tell you, Muslims are feeling terrorized. I'm sure that you, as a woman, a Muslim woman who wears a hijab, are thinking about your safety now when you're going out. Muslims who are visibly Muslim, when they're out walking in public, are now going to be thinking twice about how they behave. And that is a feeling of terror. And therefore, a terrorism charge is entirely justified in this situation.
The information in terms of how this individual was actually radicalized is coming out quite slowly, and unfortunately many of us don't have all of the pieces to the puzzle. Have you heard anything in terms of the kind of information that he might have been privy to online in terms of hate groups, where he found that information, and why those groups were allowed to function online in Canada?
Well, I've only heard what I've seen on the media. I mean, clearly there was an issue of radicalization online. These things don't happen out of the blue. Rarely does someone get radicalized just, minding their own business. There definitely had to be outside forces, either, individuals or websites that he accessed, which caused him to do what he did. With respect to what happens on websites that are accessible in Canada. Unfortunately, a lot of these websites are not located in Canada, so there's no way for the authorities to charge the operators of these websites. However, one of the recommendations that was made by Canadians United Against Hate to the federal government was to put in place legislation which charged website operators, social media platform executives, and so forth with hate crimes under Canadian law if they are allowing that sort of material to be posted on their platforms, regardless of whether they're located in Canada or not, and where possible, use extradition treaties to get these executives to face the courts in Canada.
Critical insight there from Farid Khan, who is founder of Canadians United Against Hate, and as well as being a human rights as well as anti-racism activist himself. Thank you so much, Farid, for your leadership during this critical period for Canadian Muslims.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I'm happy to provide some insight into some very disturbing recent events.
Back to Homo Jabari in the news studio.